You ever look at a piece of paper and realize it's an official declaration of war? Because that's exactly what this pink, triple carbon copy slip of sheer unadulterated audacity was. It wasn't just a notice, it wasn't a friendly reminder. It was a bureaucratic heat-seeking missile aimed directly at my bank account, slapped onto my front door with 3 aggressively torn strips of blue painter's tape. Welcome back to Sovereign Ruling. If you're new here, smash that subscribe button, because today we are diving deep into the absolute pettiness of suburban warfare. If you've been here a while, you know my philosophy. When a local tyrant hands you a ridiculous rule, you don't break it. Breaking it makes you a criminal. Complying with it makes you a victim. But maliciously complying with it, that makes you a legend. Let's look at the document in question. Cactus Blossom Estates Homeowners Association, Official Notice of Non-Compliance Date. June 9, 2026, Lot Number 142 Resident. Mark Evans Violation Code. Bylaw 14, Section B, Oclide Vertical Signage. Description. Resident has erected an unapproved wooden structure displaying text. Welcome within the visible front yard perimeter. Assessed fine, $500. Zero remedy period, 24 hours. Daily recurring fines apply thereafter, $500. For context, $500 is what it costs to fix a transmission, or buy a decent television, or fly across the country to visit family. In Cactus Blossom Estates, $500 is the price of wishing your guests a pleasant afternoon. I stood on my porch, my morning coffee cooling in my hand, staring at the neon pink rectangle. The sun was barely over the horizon, but the Arizona air was already crisping up to a cool 92 degrees. It was going to be a scorcher, both meteorologically and legally. I looked at the paper, I looked at the sign, I looked down the street. $500, I muttered to myself, taking a slow sip of caffeine. They've got to be out of their minds. But that's the thing about homeowners associations. They aren't run by minds. They are run by committees of people who have run out of hobbies, possessed by the collective desire to ensure that every single square inch of the American suburbs looks exactly like a corporate limestone cemetery. To understand how we got here, you have to understand where here is. Welcome to Scottsdale, Arizona. Specifically, welcome to Cactus Blossom Estates, a master-planned community where individuality goes to die a slow, sun-bleached death. I bought this house 2 years ago. The layout is great, the backyard has a nice pool, and the location is perfect for my sanity. The only catch? The CC&Rs, the covenants and conditions and restrictions. When you buy a house here, they hand you a binder thicker than the Phoenix Yellow Pages and expect you to sign away your soul. In Cactus Blossom, the Architectural Review Committee has managed to outlaw the concept of color. I am not exaggerating. There is an official, laminated palette of acceptable house paints kept under lock and key at the community center. If you want to repaint your stucco, you have exactly 3 choices. Desert Sand, which is just beige. Sad Camel, which is beige with a hint of depression. Existential Dust, which is beige but lighter, so it reflects the futility of human existence. If you paint your trim a shade that even remotely flirts with white or brown, an emergency drone will practically fly over your house and drop a cease and desist letter down your chimney. The rules don't stop at paint. The landscaping guidelines read like a penal code. Your grass, if you are foolish enough to maintain a patch of turf in the middle of the Sonoran Desert, must be kept at a uniform height of precisely 1.5 inches. If a blade reaches 1.7 inches, you get a letter. If it drops to 1.2 inches due to a bad mower blade, you get a letter. We have a guy down the street, Bob, a retired mechanical engineer. Bob is a good dude. Last month, Bob got a $150 fine because his mailbox was leaning at a 3-degree angle to the left. 3 degrees. The HOA code enforcement officer actually walked around the neighborhood with a digital spirit level, checking the plumb lines of metal posts. Bob had to go out there with a leveling level and a rubber mallet at 2 in the afternoon, sweating through his Hawaiian shirt just to avoid a secondary penalty. Then there's the trash can rule. The garbage truck rolls through the neighborhood at roughly 7 a.m. on Tuesdays. According to the bylaws, containers must not be placed at the curb earlier than 6 p.m. the night prior and must be removed from public view promptly upon collection. What does promptly mean? Apparently, it means before the echo of the truck's engine fades from the atmosphere. Miss the window because you were in the shower or on a work call. Boom. Pink slip. It is an ecosystem designed to generate anxiety. It's a community where neighbors don't wave at each other. They spy on each other from behind plantation shutters, waiting for a stray wee weed to sprout from a gravel bed so they can report it to the mothership. And at the center of this web of micromanagement sits one person. Let's talk about the corpus delicti, the item that triggered a $500 administrative assault. It was a sign. It wasn't a neon billboard flashing advertisements for a local strip club. It wasn't a political banner endorsing a controversial candidate. It wasn't even a funny doormat that said something sarcastic. It was a beautiful, completely harmless, 3-foot-tall piece of reclaimed barnwood. My sister had bought it for me at a weekend artisan market up in Sedona. It was hand-painted by a local artist. It had a lovely, rustic look to it, weathered teal paint, a small stenciled saguaro cactus at the top, and the word welcome, written in an elegant, looping cursive font down the center. It didn't block the sidewalk, it didn't hang over the fence. It just leaned casually against the stucco pillar right next to my front door, nestled between a potted aloe vera plant and a decorative terracotta pot. It was polite, it was charming, it was a tiny, microscopic speck of human warmth in a vast desert of mandated architectural sterility. Apparently, it was also a weapon of mass destruction. I leaned against my porch railing, looking down at it. "You don't look like a threat to Western civilization," I told the sign. The sign, being a piece of wood, said nothing back, but it didn't have to. The pink slip spoke for it. According to the HOA, my little rustic greeting was an unauthorized vertical projection. By standing upright, it had crossed a legal line. It was making a statement. It was existing without a permit. I pulled out my phone, snapped a photo of the citation, and uploaded it to my cloud drive under a folder named HOA Nonsense. I already had 12 items in that folder, mostly consisting of warnings about my garage door being open for longer than reasonable loading parameters, while I was trying to unpack groceries. But this was the first time they had jumped straight to a monetary fine without a warning letter. That meant someone had fast-tracked it. Someone wanted blood. Right on cue I heard it. Swish, 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 swish. The rhythmic, synthetic sound of high-density nylon friction. The sound of a hunter stalking its prey through the manicured wilderness of Cactus Blossom Estates. I looked toward the sidewalk. If you've ever watched a nature documentary about apex predators, you know they have a specific gait. A lion prowls. A shark glides. Brenda power walks. Brenda is the president of the Cactus Blossom Estates Homeowners Association Board of Directors. She is a woman in her late 50s who treats her volunteer, unpaid position with the gravity of a Supreme Court justice and the tactical aggression of a cartel boss. Today, she was in her element. She was wearing a matching neon coral athletic tracksuit that practically hummed with synthetic energy. On her head was an oversized white plastic visor that extended a full 6 inches past her face, acting like a radar dish for code violations. Her eyes were completely obscured by a pair of wraparound, polarized, mirrored Oakley sunglasses. When you looked at Brenda, you didn't see her eyes. You just saw a distorted, fisheye reflection of your own impending financial doom. In her right hand, she gripped a heavy-duty aluminum clipboard. This wasn't a standard office clipboard. This was a tactical clipboard with a built-in storage compartment, loaded with citation pads, a digital tape measure, a laser distance finder, and a printed directory of every resident's phone number and vehicle registration. She wasn't just walking down the street, she was sweeping it. Her head moved left and right in mechanical, precise arcs, scanning driveways, checking the alignment of trash bins, monitoring the health of bougainvillea bushes. When her visor locked onto my house, she altered her trajectory. She didn't turn. She veered with purpose, her sneakers crunching onto the edge of my pristine gravel yard. "Morning, Mark," she called out. Her voice was an artistic triumph of passive aggression. It carried that high-pitched, sing-song sweetness that people use when they are pretending to be neighborly, but it had the cold, metallic undertone of a guillotine blade sliding down its track. "Brenda," I said, staying right where I was on the porch. I didn't move an inch. I kept my posture relaxed, my hands wrapped around my coffee mug. "Nice day for a walk. Though I think your visor is technically violating the neighborhood restriction on unauthorized overhead canopies." She didn't laugh. Brenda doesn't possess the facial muscles required for genuine humor. Instead, she marched right up the driveway, stopping exactly at the boundary line where my concrete met the public sidewalk. She knew the rules. She knew that if she stepped onto my actual porch without permission after issuing a citation, I could technically hit her with a trespassing warning. She was a professional tyrant. She planted her left hand on her hip, cocked her head, and tapped the aluminum clipboard against her thigh. Clack, clack, clack. I see you found our official notification, she said, nodding toward the pink slip glowing on my door. Oh, this? I pulled the pink paper off the door with a loud, deliberate rip. Yeah, I found it. I was actually wondering if the printing office ran out of white paper, or if you just use neon pink so the police helicopters can see who hasn't paid their dues from the air. Brenda smiled. It was a terrifying movement of her lips that didn't reach the rest of her face. We find that high-visibility pink ensures there is no misunderstanding regarding the urgency of the matter. The board takes visual harmony very seriously, Mark. Visual harmony, I repeated, holding up the slip. Brenda, it's a welcome sign. It says welcome. It's literally the most polite object on the entire street. It's an unapproved decorative element, she countered, her voice dropping the sweet act and entering full-blown prosecutorial mode. She flipped open her clipboard with a sharp click. Bylaw 14, Section B. Clear as day. No resident shall erect, lean, or otherwise display any unauthorized vertical signage, flag, or banner on the exterior of the property visible from the common area. Did you submit an architectural variance request form before placing that item by your entryway? For a piece of wood? For any structure, Mark, wood, plastic, metal, or stone. If it has text and it is vertical, it constitutes signage. Signage requires a 90-day review period, a $50 filing fee, and a vote by the Aesthetic Subcommittee. The Aesthetic Subcommittee, I muttered. You mean you, Clara, from down the street and that guy who sits in his garage looking at clouds? Brenda's posture stiffened. The mirrored lenses of her sunglasses flashed in the desert sun, cutting through the glare. The committee exists to protect your property values, Mark. If we let you have a rustic sign, what's next? Someone puts up a neon sign for a taco stand? Someone paints their garage doors hot pink? We live in a society with rules. We live in a subdivision, Brenda. Don't get philosophical on me. I walked down the steps of my porch, holding the pink slip in one hand and my coffee in the other. I stopped about 3 feet away from her, right at the edge of my property line. The air between us practically crackled with tension. Look, Brenda, I said, trying one last time to appeal to whatever tiny shred of human decency might be buried beneath that coral tracksuit. Let's be reasonable here. The sign is 36 inches tall. It sits behind my potted plant. You can only see it if you are specifically looking down my walkway. It's not hurting anyone. It's not dropping property values. Can we just call this a warning? I'll leave it where it is, and we can all move on with our lives. Brenda looked down at her clipboard, then slowly looked back up at me. She adjusted her visor with a slow, deliberate movement. The fine stands, Mark, she said flatly, and as of tomorrow at 8 o'clock in the morning, if that vertical sign is still standing on your property, a secondary fine of $100 per day will begin accumulating. We have the legal authority to place a lien on your home if the balance exceeds $1,000. I suggest you take it down. She was enjoying this. You could see it in the slight twitch at the corner of her mouth. This wasn't about property values. This wasn't about visual harmony. This was about power. It was about a retired middle manager finding a realm where her word was absolute law, and she wasn't about to let some guy with a coffee mug challenge her sovereignty. I stared at her reflection in her sunglasses for a long, quiet 5 seconds. I could feel the anger bubbling up, but I forced it down. Getting angry is an amateur move. When you get angry, you yell, you make threats, and then they use your text messages or Ring doorbell footage against you in a hearing. Instead of getting mad, I got analytical. I took a deep breath. I let out a slow, calm sigh. Okay, I said. Brenda blinked behind her glasses. She wasn't expecting immediate capitulation. Okay? Yes, okay, I said, putting on my best, most cooperative, neighborly smile. You are completely right, Brenda. The bylaws are the bedrock of this community. Without them, we'd basically be living in anarchy. If the code says no unauthorized vertical signs, then there should be no unauthorized vertical signs. I will personally ensure that by tonight, that sign is no longer standing vertical on my property. She looked at me suspiciously. Her bureaucratic radar was pinging, telling her that this was too easy, but she couldn't find a flaw in my statement. Excellent, she said slowly, closing her clipboard with a definitive snap. I'm glad you've decided to be a team player, Mark. It would be a shame if this escalated. Oh, I agree, I said, taking another sip of coffee. We wouldn't want things to escalate. Have a wonderful patrol, Brenda. Watch out for those 3-degree mailboxes. She gave me a cold nod, spun on her heel, and her tracksuit began its rhythmic swish, swish, swish as she marched down the sidewalk toward her next victim. I watched her go until she turned the corner around a perfectly trimmed desert willow. Then I turned around and looked at my porch. I walked over to the sign. I picked it up. It was heavy, solid pine. I ran my fingers over the stenciled cursive letters. "Welcome," she said, "vertical." I whispered to myself. A slow, devious grin began to spread across my face. The kind of grin that usually means my bank account is about to take a hit. But my soul is about to be completely restored. Brenda thought she had won. She thought she had broken my spirit with a pink piece of carbon paper and a threat of a property lien. But she had done something far worse for her own long-term health. She had given me a specific definition to work with. She had specified vertical. She had specified on my property. I walked inside, carried the sign into the house, and tossed the pink citation onto the kitchen counter. I didn't go to work that morning. I didn't check my emails. Instead, I went straight to my laptop, opened a fresh document, and pulled up the official public records for Maricopa County. The war had officially begun, and Brenda had no idea she had just marched her troops right into an ambush. If you've ever wanted to simulate the feeling of your soul slowly exiting your body through your ears, I highly recommend reading a 240-page book of Homeowners Association covenants, conditions, and restrictions at 2 o'clock in the morning. After Brenda's little tracksuit-fueled power trip on my driveway, I didn't just take the sign down. I went to work. My dining room table looked like the war room of a deeply unhinged conspiracy theorist. I had 3 empty mugs of high-octane black coffee, a half-eaten sleeve of saltine crackers, and 4 different colored highlighters scattered across pages of legal jargon. You see, guys, most people make the mistake of fighting an HOA with emotion. They go to the board meetings, they get red in the face, they scream about their constitutional rights, and then they get slapped with a secondary fine for disruptive conduct. But an HOA isn't a government. It's a corporation based on a contract you signed when you bought the deed. You can't beat them with the First Amendment. You have to beat them with their own dictionary. I started with the section Brenda quoted. Bylaw 14, Section B. I ran a yellow highlighter across the exact text. No resident shall erect, lean, or otherwise display any unauthorized vertical signage, flag, or banner on the exterior of the property visible from the common area. I stared at that sentence until the words started swimming. Vertical. I pulled out my phone and looked up the legal and architectural definitions of vertical. Vertical, being in a position or direction perpendicular to the plane of the horizon. Upright. If a sign is lying completely flat on the ground, it is, by definition, horizontal. It is no longer a vertical signage element. It's a ground covering. It's a surface treatment. "Okay, Brenda," I muttered, spinning a blue highlighter between my fingers. "Let's say I paint 'Welcome' flat on my driveway. What happens then?" I flipped back to Section 8, Paragraph 3. Driveway and pathway maintenance. All driveways and entry paths must be maintained in their original, unmarred concrete or aggregate state. No staining, painting, or coating of driveway surfaces is permitted without prior written consent from the Architectural Review Committee. Ah, she caught me there. If I painted the driveway, they'd hit me with a property modification violation, fine me another $500, hire a commercial pressure washing crew to blast it off, and mail me the 4-figure bill. I needed a horizontal surface that was highly visible, right in Brenda's line of sight, but completely outside the boundary lines of my private lot. And that's when I opened the property maps. I hopped onto the Maricopa County Geographic Information Systems, GIS, portal. If you've never used a county GIS map, it's a beautiful thing. It shows the exact legal boundaries of every parcel of land, every easement, and every right-of-way in the state. I zoomed into Scottsdale. I zoomed into Cactus Blossom Estates. I clicked on Lot 142, my house. A bright blue box illuminated my property lines. It extended from the back brick wall, through the house, across the front yard, and stopped exactly 2 inches before the concrete sidewalk. Interesting. The sidewalk wasn't mine. The sidewalk was designated as a common area utility and pedestrian easement. According to the HOA binder, the association held total maintenance and regulatory authority over the common areas. But then I clicked on the gray strip representing the actual street. Cactus Blossom Lane. Normally, when you click a residential street in an HOA community, a little box pops up that says owner, Cactus Blossom Estates HOA LC. That means it's a private road. It means the HOA can pave it, gate it, and write their own traffic tickets if they want to. I clicked the street. A data box popped up on the left side of my screen. Maricopa County Parcel. Registry. Right-of-way, date. Tackleding street name. Cactus Blossom Lane Segment. ID 99823 to ID 99885 owner. City of Scottsdale Municipal Right-of-way, Maintenance Jurisdiction. Scottsdale Public Works Dept. Recording date. November 14, 2012. Document type. Deed of dedication. Public right-of-way transfer. Jotquildguin. I sat back so fast my wooden dining chair groaned. No way, I whispered. I opened a secondary tab and dug into the historical public records for the city. I found the minutes from a Scottsdale City Council meeting, dated November 2012. Turns out, during the subprime mortgage fallout, the developer of Cactus Blossom Estates went bankrupt. The newly formed HOA board was bleeding cash and couldn't afford the long-term asphalt, maintenance, storm drain filtering, and pothole repairs for the neighborhood streets. So, in a desperate move to save their balance sheet, the HOA legally voted to dedicate the streets to the city. They literally handed ownership of the asphalt over to the municipality of Scottsdale in exchange for the city taking over the paving bills. Do you realize what this meant? The HOA owned my front yard. The HOA regulated my porch. The HOA even had an easement over the sidewalk. But the actual black asphalt out front, the road itself, the HOA had exactly 0% ownership of it. It was a public highway. Brenda had as much legal right to regulate that asphalt as she did to write a speeding ticket on the interstate. Now, I couldn't just walk out into a public street with a can of spray paint. That's a misdemeanor. It's defacing public property. And instead of Brenda writing me a citation, the Scottsdale police would be putting me in handcuffs. I needed the city's permission to touch that road. But why would a city let a random guy paint a public street? I started digging into the Scottsdale Municipal Code. Looking through the Department of Transportation and Public Works subsections, I searched for asphalt modifications, street permits, and encroachment clearances. And then, at 3:42 a.m., I found the holy grail of municipal loopholes, Scottsdale City Ordinance Sec. 42218, the Neighborhood Traffic Calming Art Program, NTCAP. I leaned into my screen, my eyes completely bloodshot, reading every single syllable. The program was launched in the early 2020s as an experimental budget-saving measure. In residential areas where speeding was a consistent issue, the city didn't want to spend $20,000 installing concrete speed humps, which also tore up the undercarriages of fire trucks and ambulances. Instead, they took a page out of urban design research from Europe. The ordinance explicitly stated, to promote pedestrians and safety and reduce vehicular transit velocities within residential zones, the City of Scottsdale may issue a revocable municipal permit to any resident or group of residents to install approved, high-visibility asphalt murals, pavement art, within the public right-of-way. These installations serve as visual traffic calming devices by altering the perceived width of the roadway, thereby inducing drivers to instinctively reduce speed. I started laughing, a low, villainous chuckle that probably woke up my neighbor Bob's dog down the street. Brenda didn't want my elegant, 36-inch vertical welcome sign because it disrupted the visual harmony of the streetscape. Fine, I was going to use the municipal authority of the City of Scottsdale to install a 40-foot-wide industrial-grade, city-sanctioned traffic calming device directly into the pavement. And because it was a traffic control device approved by the city, any attempt by the HOA to deface it, paint over it, or remove it would constitute an illegal modification of a municipal traffic control mechanism, which carries a heavy fine and potential misdemeanor charges under state law. I opened Adobe Illustrator on my laptop. I pulled up the exact dimensions of the street segment right in front of my driveway. It was exactly 28 feet wide from curb to curb. I didn't just want to paint a random geometric pattern. If I was doing this, I was going to make sure the message was loud and clear. I designed a massive, hyper-realistic woven texture welcome mat. I gave it a solid beige border to mock their love of beige. I added a dark brown herringbone pattern to simulate coif fabric. On the left and right edges, I drew large, ornamental tassels that would extend all the way to the concrete gutters, and right across the center, stretching across both lanes of traffic in giant, bold, inescapable block letters, I stenciled the words, "Welcome to my house." I checked the city guidelines for the program. The artwork couldn't mimic official transit signs, no painting a giant stop sign or a turn arrow, But alphanumeric text was fully permitted as long as it wasn't commercial advertising or obscene language. Welcome was completely benign. It was practically civic-minded. At 9 o'clock the next morning, I walked into the Scottsdale One Civic Center building. I was wearing a crisp button-down shirt, slacks, and my most professional, I am a law-abiding, tax-paying citizen face. Under my arm, I carried a thick, glossy manila folder containing 3 copies of my design schematics, a printout of the city ordinance, and a cashier's check for the $50 administrative filing fee. I navigated the fluorescent-lit corridors until I found the counter labeled Department of Transportation and Municipal Infrastructure. Behind the counter sat a man whose name tag read Gary. Gary looked like a guy who had spent the last 25 years explaining to angry contractors why their concrete footings were 2 inches too close to a water main. He had a look of profound, eternal boredom etched into his face. I stepped up to the glass. "Morning, Gary," I said, sliding the folder through the document slot. Gary slowly looked up from his monitor. He looked at me, then looked down at the folder. He didn't open it immediately. He just rested his hand on it, like he was checking its pulse. "What are we doing today?" Gary asked, his voice a flat monotone drawl. "Gary, my friend, I am here to participate in civic safety," I said enthusiastically. "I am submitting an application for the Neighborhood Traffic Calming Art Program under Ordinance 42.
Section 218.
Gary blinked. He slowly opened the folder. He pulled out my beautifully rendered, full-color layout of the 40-foot welcome mat. He stared at it for a very long time. He didn't move. He didn't make a sound. Finally, he took off his wire-rimmed glasses, pulled a microfiber cloth from his pocket, slowly wiped the lenses, put them back on, and looked at the drawing again. "Sir," Gary said, his voice entirely devoid of emotion, "this is a blueprint for a giant doormat. It is a highly engineered, high-visibility pavement mural designed to mentally disrupt the continuous visual plane of the driver," I corrected, using the exact language from the city's urban design handbook. "If you look at the traffic data for Cactus Blossom Lane, people use it as a cut-through to avoid the light on Shea Boulevard. They fly down that street at 40 miles an hour. Kids live there, Gary. Think of the children." Gary flipped to the next page, which contained my formal traffic justification narrative. "You're saying this text will slow down traffic?" "Absolutely. When a driver sees a giant text string on the asphalt that says, 'Welcome to my house,' their brain experiences a brief cognitive delay while processing the unexpected syntax. That delay causes an involuntary lifting of the right foot off the accelerator pedal. It's science, Gary." Gary looked at me through the glass. I could see a tiny microscopic spark of amusement in his left eye. He's been working for the city a long time. He knows exactly what an HOA neighborhood looks like, and he knows exactly what kind of person lives in one. "Is this house in Cactus Blossom Estates?" Gary asked. "It is," I replied. "And let me guess." Gary leaned forward slightly, dropping his voice a fraction of a decibel. "The HOA president is a woman who walks around with a clipboard and a visor?" "Matching neon coral tracksuit," I confirmed. "And mirrored sunglasses. She fined me $500 yesterday because a 3-foot wooden sign next to my door wasn't approved by the aesthetic subcommittee." Gary let out a long, slow sigh. He reached under the counter and pulled out a heavy, mechanical ink stamp that looked like it dated back to the Hoover administration. "The HOA owns the yards, but they don't own our right-of-way," Gary muttered, flipping through my application paperwork to the signature page. "The City Council passed this ordinance to encourage community involvement. Technically, your application meets every single criteria listed in the Public Works Manual. The text isn't a trademarked brand, it's not profane, and the colors comply with the high-contrast safety parameters. I made sure to use Cactus Blossom Tan as the base color, Gary, for community integration." "Right," Gary said. He brought the heavy stamp down onto my paperwork with a loud, satisfying clack. "City of Scottsdale Depth of Public Infrastructure Approved Permit No. 884 TCR Date, June 09-2026 BYG Jensen Notice." In line with Municipal Code 42-218, Gary slid a copy of the stamped document back through the slot, along with a laminated bright blue placard. "This is your official municipal work permit," Gary said, his face returning to its baseline state of bureaucratic neutrality. "You are authorized to close one lane of Cactus Blossom Lane for a period not to exceed 6 hours to complete the installation. You must use Department of Transportation approved thermoplastic or acrylic lane marking paint. If you use standard house paint, it'll wash off in the monsoon, and I'll have to code violate you myself. Industrial grade, retro-reflective DO resin only, Gary. I promise. Good luck, Mark, Gary said, already looking back at his computer screen. Make sure you get the tassels straight. I walked out of the Civic Center into the blinding Arizona heat, clutching the laminated permit to my chest. I felt like a medieval knight who had just been handed a royal decree allowing him to build a fortress in his neighbor's front yard. The legal foundation was laid. The city had signed off on it. The HOA was powerless to stop the installation. Now, I just needed to hire an army of men with heavy machinery to lay down 40 feet of industrial hospitality directly onto the asphalt before Brenda finished her morning power walk. If you've ever watched a DIY home improvement video and thought, hey, I can probably do that this weekend with a couple of rollers and a trip to Home Depot. Let me stop you right there. When it comes to petty neighborhood revenge, amateur execution is a death sentence. Initially, my sleep-deprived brain thought this would be a simple operation. I'd buy 40 gallons of exterior acrylic paint, wait until midnight, throw on some black clothing like a budget ninja, and roll out the welcome mat myself. But as I sat at my desk looking at the official City of Scottsdale permit number 884 TC art, reality hit me. Municipal infrastructure doesn't care about your feelings. And it certainly doesn't care about standard house paint. Public roads are brutal environments. They are subjected to thousands of pounds of rolling rubber, baking Sonoran desert heat that reaches 160 Fahrenheit on the asphalt surface, and torrential flash floods during monsoon season. If I used standard paint, 3 things would happen, and all of them would end with Brenda laughing at me. The paint would pick up tire tracks instantly, turning my beautiful welcome mat into a smeared, gray mess within 48 hours. The first heavy rain would wash the pigment into the storm drains, resulting in a massive environmental fine from the city. Gary from the Public Works Department would personally revoke my permit and force me to pay for commercial sandblasting. No, if I was going to do this, it had to be structurally permanent. It had to be unscrubbable. I needed the exact same material the Department of Transportation uses to paint highway lines, alkyd-based thermoplastic resin. For the uninitiated, thermoplastic paint isn't poured out of a bucket. It comes in solid, heavy blocks of plastic or bags of powder. You have to dump it into a specialized truck-mounted diesel boiler, crank the temperature up to a blistering 400 Fahrenheit until it melts into a glowing liquid, and then extrude it onto the pavement under high pressure while simultaneously dropping microscopic glass beads onto the wet plastic so it reflects headlights at night. I pulled up my phone and started calling local residential painting companies. The conversations went exactly how you'd expect. Call 1, Precision Painters, Scottsdale Me. Hi. I need someone to paint a 40-foot geometric structure on a flat surface. Receptionist. We can absolutely handle that. Is it a pool deck or a backyard patio? Me. It's the public street right in front of my house. Receptionist. Sir, we do accent walls and crown molding. If we touch the street, our insurance company will literally dissolve itself. Call 2, Desert Color Masters Me. Do you guys have a thermal preheater truck for road markings? Manager. Son, do you think you're calling the state government? We use spray guns for stucco. Good luck with your highway project. After 5 more rejections, I realized I was looking in the wrong place. I didn't need painters. I needed the guys who build the world. I needed heavy highway contractors. That afternoon, I drove out to the industrial fringes of Phoenix, where the air smells like diesel exhaust and hot tar. I parked my truck outside a massive gravel lot, surrounded by an 8-foot chain-link fence topped with razor wire. The sign on the corrugated metal building read, Big Mike's Lime Striping and Paving Contractors. This place was the real deal. The yard was filled with massive yellow dump trucks, flatbeds carrying specialized asphalt rollers, and 3-wheeled striping machines that looked like high-tech lawnmowers designed by Mad Max. Millions of dollars of heavy machinery sat baking in the sun, surrounded by stacks of white and yellow plastic pallets. I walked into the front office. The air conditioning was struggling against the heat, hummed along by a retro fridge in the corner. Behind a desk made of solid oak sat a man who looked like he had personally paved half of the western United States. He was easily 6'4", with shoulders like a silverback gorilla, a thick gray beard, and a grease-stained neon yellow mesh cap pushed back on his bald head. His hands were the size of dinner plates, covered in calluses and faint traces of permanent white road paint. He didn't look up from his ledger when the door chimed. If you're here to sell me hydraulic fluid, the answer is no, he rumbled. his voice sounding like a bucket of gravel being kicked down a flight of stairs. "I'm not selling anything," I said, stepping up to the counter. "I'm looking for Big Mike." The giant man slowly raised his head. His eyes were small, sharp, and entirely unimpressed. "You're looking at him. What do you want, kid? We don't do residential driveways." "I don't want a driveway," I said, sliding my laminated City of Scottsdale permit onto the counter, followed by the full-color, full-scale schematics of my 40-foot welcome mat. "I want to commission a municipal traffic calming installation." Mike leaned forward, his massive forearms flattening his ledger. He picked up the schematic with 2 fingers, holding it like a delicate piece of ancient parchment. He stared at it for a long, agonizingly quiet 30 seconds. His eyebrows slowly crept up toward the rim of his neon cap. He looked at the drawing. He looked at the stamped city permit. He looked back at me. "You want me to paint a giant welcome mat?" Mike asked, his voice deadpan. "Like, with tassels?" "Exactly like that," I nodded, leaning against the counter. "In industrial-grade, reflective, DOT-approved thermoplastic resin." Mike grunted, dropping the paper back onto the desk. "Kid, do you know how much a thermal striping crew costs? My trucks don't turn their engines on for less than 4 figures. This requires a preheater truck, an extrusion applicator, a drop-on bead specialist, and at least 4 guys setting up a moving traffic control pocket." "I know the cost," I replied smoothly, "and I'm prepared to pay your standard commercial daily rate. Cash, check, or whatever keeps your crew happy." Mike narrowed his eyes. He leaned back in his creaking office chair, which looked like it was begging for mercy under his weight. "Why? Why the hell would anyone spend private money to paint a municipal road with a doormat pattern?" "Because," I smiled, "my HOA president is a woman named Brenda who wears a neon coral tracksuit and thinks she owns the earth. She fined me $500 for a 3-foot wooden welcome sign on my porch because it was vertical. So, I found out the city owns the street, got a traffic calming permit, and now I'm going horizontal." The silence stretched inside the office. For a second, I thought Big Mike was going to throw me out of his shop for wasting his time. Then his chest began to rumble. The rumble turned into a chuckle, and the chuckle erupted into a booming, deep-bellied laugh that rattled the plastic blinds on the windows. He slammed a massive fist down onto the oak desk, making the pens jump out of their holder. "Brenda, huh?" Mike roared, wiping a tear of genuine joy from his eye. "God, I hate HOAs. My sister lives in one of those communities over in Gilbert. They fined her because her garage door was open for 20 minutes while she was unloading her dying mother's wheelchair." 20 minutes! See? It's an epidemic, Mike. I'm just trying to provide a cure. "A 40-foot welcome mat," Mike muttered, looking back at the schematic with a look of pure, unadulterated respect. "You're an evil genius, kid. A beautiful, petty, evil genius." He grabbed a red marker and circled the dimensions on my layout. "All right, let's talk logistics. If we're doing this, we do it right. I'm not just slapping some cheap traffic paint down. We're going to use our premium alkyd compound. It has a high binder content, which means once it fuses with the aggregate of that asphalt, the only way Brenda gets it off is if she uses a cold planer milling machine to grind the entire street down to the dirt. That is exactly what I want to hear." Mike called his foreman, a lean, wiry guy named Hector who had a permanent squint from 30 years of looking at reflective highway lines, into the office. The 3 of us crowded around the desk, treating my welcome mat schematic like a top-secret military invasion plan. "The biggest issue isn't the paint," Hector said, tapping the map of Cactus Blossom Estates with a pencil. "It's the timing window. HOAs are like bee nests. You disturb them during the day, they swarm you. We need to be completely done before the neighborhood wakes up." "What's the permit window?" Mike asked. "Permit says we are authorized to occupy the right-of-way starting at 6 a.m., I said, "and the city code allows municipal construction noise to begin at exactly 060 on weekdays." "Perfect," Mike said, a predatory grin appearing through his gray beard. "We arrive at 0545. We roll in completely dark. No lights, no backup beepers, engines at low RPM. We stage the vehicles directly outside your house. The second the clock hits 0600, we fire up the burners, drop the cones, and we strike." "Brenda starts her power walk at exactly 6:30 a.m., I warned them. "I watched her schedule for a week. She leaves her house down the street, turns the corner, and hits my segment of the road right around 0635. Hector shook his head. 30 minutes isn't enough time to lay down a 3-color custom thermoplastic mural. The base coat of Cactus Blossom Tan needs at least 15 minutes to dry before we can overlay the black text and the yellow border tassels. If she catches us while the resin is still at 300 degrees, she's going to make a scene and try to stand in front of the trucks. Let her stand in front of them, Mike chuckled. The paint will melt her sneakers right to the road. As tempting as that sounds, we want this clean, I said. Here's the plan for cover. Tuesday morning is garbage day. The automated side loader trucks for the city roll through the neighborhood right at 7 a.m. They are loud. They create a ton of ambient noise, and everyone is used to hearing heavy diesel engines early in the morning. If anyone hears a truck at 6 a.m., they'll just assume the garbage collectors are running early. Nobody looks out their windows for a trash truck. And what about Brenda? Hector asked. If she shows up at 0635 and the paint is wet? I'll handle Brenda, I said, tapping my laminated permit. I will stand at the perimeter line with the legal documentation. Your job is just to keep the burners hot and the lines straight. Do not stop spraying, no matter how loud she screams. Mike leaned over the counter, extending his massive hand. We have a deal, Mark. My crew will be there on Tuesday at 05:45 sharp. We're going to give Cactus Blossom Estates the biggest damn welcome they've ever seen. I shook his hand. It felt like shaking hands with the industrial vice grip. Let's make history, Mike. The next few days passed in a blur of anticipation. Every time I walked out my front door and looked at the empty, pristine black asphalt of Cactus Blossom Lane, I couldn't help but smirk. Monday night felt like the night before Christmas, if Christmas involved heavy-duty industrial paving equipment and malicious legal compliance. I barely slept. I kept checking my watch, checking the weather radar to ensure there was 0% chance of moisture, and practicing my calm, unbothered facial expressions in the bathroom mirror. Tuesday morning arrived. 5:45 a.m. The desert sky was that deep, pre-dawn indigo color, the air surprisingly cool at 81 degrees. The neighborhood was dead silent. Not a single car moved. Not a single light was on in any of the massive beige stucco houses lining the street. I stood on my driveway dressed in jeans, a polo shirt, and a pair of dark sunglasses despite the dawn light. In my right hand, I held a massive Yeti thermos filled to the brim with black coffee. In my left shirt pocket, the laminated city permit was folded neatly, ready to be deployed like a tactical shield. Then I heard it. A low, deep, rhythmic vibration in the earth. It wasn't loud. It was a muffled subterranean rumble that you felt in your teeth more than you heard in your ears. Down at the entrance of the subdivision, 3 massive shapes turned the corner off the main road. They moved without their amber flashing safety lights, keeping their headlights on low beam. It was Mike's invading army. Leading the convoy was a massive dual rear-wheel flatbed truck towing a specialized trailer. On the trailer sat the heart of the operation, a massive cylindrical thermoplastic preheater kettle. It looked like a giant industrial mixer, wrapped in insulation with heavy diesel lines running into its base. Even from 20 yards away, I could see the shimmering heat distortion waving off the top of the tank. Mike had fired up the burners at his shop an hour ago. The plastic was already melted, gooey, and cooking at 400 Fahrenheit. Behind the kettle truck came a secondary flatbed loaded with pallets of materials, traffic cones, and the heavy-duty stencils. Bringing up the rear was a smaller, agile utility vehicle equipped with a specialized pressurized spray gun designed for wide-area asphalt coating. The trucks glided up to my curb with mechanical precision. They didn't slam their brakes. They slid into position directly in front of my lot, completely blocking both lanes of traffic. The truck doors clicked open simultaneously. 4 men stepped out, all wearing matching high-visibility orange safety vests, heavy leather boots, and industrial respirators hanging around their necks. From the passenger side of the lead truck, Big Mike lowered his massive frame onto the asphalt. He looked like an army general reviewing the front lines. He caught my eye, gave me a sharp, 2-finger salute, and looked at his watch. The minute hand on my watch ticked over. 6 a.m. All right, boys. Mike's voice cut through the morning silence like a gunshot, no longer trying to hide the noise. The permit is live, burners to full, drop the cones. Let's give this neighborhood some hospitality. Instantly, the quiet operation turned into a coordinated explosion of industrial activity. The driver of the lead truck hit a switch, and the flashing amber LED safety strobes flared to life, illuminating the dark beige facades of Cactus Blossom Estates in a rhythmic, pulsing orange glow. The auxiliary's diesel engine on the preheater truck fired up with a loud mechanical roar, driving the massive internal paddles that stirred the molten plastic. Hector and two other guys sprinted down the street, dropping high-visibility orange traffic cones 20 feet in either direction, completely sealing off the road. Hector carried a large chalk line reel. He ran to the far curb, aligned himself with my property boundary, and snapped the line against the asphalt with a sharp thwack. A perfect, bright white line marked the boundary of the world's largest welcome mat. I took a deep, satisfying sip of my coffee. The smell of hot, molten synthetic resin and diesel exhaust began to fill the crisp morning air, completely obliterating the scent of the nearby desert sage. It was loud, it was bright, it was completely obnoxious. It was an industrial assault on the visual and auditory harmony of the community, and it was entirely protected by the sovereign authority of the municipal government. I looked down the street toward the corner where Brenda's house sat. I knew that noise like this would act like a bat signal for her brand of entitlement. Any minute now, I murmured to myself, leaning against my brick pillar. Come on out, Brenda. Your mat is being laid. If you've never seen a commercial road stripping crew execute a precision layout, it is a beautifully chaotic symphony of heat, noise, and chemical engineering. By 0612 a.m., the cactus blossom tan base layer was flowing. Hector stood behind the utility vehicle, operating a pressurized extrusion wand that laid down wide, parallel bands of molten plastic directly onto the black asphalt. The material came out of the nozzle at nearly 380 Fahrenheit, smoking slightly as it hit the cool morning road surface. The instant the liquid met the aggregate, it began an exothermic reaction, chemically fusing itself to the street. Keep it tight to the chalk line. Jimmy, Hector shouted over the roar of the auxiliary diesel engine. We need a clean edge or the border won't lock. The smell was intense, a heavy, industrial mixture of melted synthetic polymers, petroleum binders, and hot diesel exhaust. It completely obliterated the crisp morning desert air. Two other crew members walked directly behind the applicator, using long-handled, heavy-duty scrapers to smooth out the liquid into one massive, seamless, horizontal rectangle that stretched exactly 28 feet from curb to curb and extended 40 feet down the street. How's the dry time looking, Hector? I called out, taking a sip of my coffee. It's baking from the bottom up, Mark, Hector yelled back, wiping sweat from his forehead with the back of a thick leather glove. Asphalt is retaining yesterday's heat. It's going to stay tacky for another 10 minutes before we can drop the text stencils on it. We're on schedule, but we're loud. He wasn't kidding. The preheater truck sounded like a jet engine idling in a cave. I looked up and down the street. A few window blinds in the neighboring houses were beginning to twitch. A porch light flickered on across the street. The community was waking up, and their pristine beige paradise was currently being occupied by a commercial paving operation. At exactly 0625 a.m., the base layer had cooled from a molten liquid to a solid, rubbery consistency. It looked like a giant, perfect desert tan canvas laid right across the road. Bring up the stencils, Mike roared from the flatbed. Let's get the typography down before the traffic picks up. Hector and Jimmy dragged massive, laser-cut aluminum sheets off the back of the truck. These weren't standard stencils. They were custom machined templates for 10-foot-tall block letters. They laid them out across the tan background, aligning them with professional precision. Jimmy hoisted a specialized, hand-propelled marker cart loaded with reflective DOT black resin. He lined the machine up with the first stencil slot. All right, Mark, Mike chuckled, walking over to my driveway with a massive donut in his hand. This is the point of no return. Once this black plastic hits that tan base, it copolymerizes. They become one single piece of solid plastic. You ready to welcome the neighborhood? Mike, I said, raising my coffee thermos, let it rip. The black resin had just finished filling the letter W when the storm arrived. I checked my watch. 0632 a.m. She was 3 minutes early. Down the sidewalk, sprinting with a level of athletic intensity that defied her age, was Brenda. But the legendary neon coral tracksuit was nowhere to be seen. This was an emergency deployment, which meant Brenda was operating in combat-ready casual. She was wearing a fuzzy, oversized, bright floral print bathrobe that billowed behind her like a superhero cape. Her hair was locked in a chaotic cloud of pink plastic sleeping rollers, and her feet were shoved into a pair of fluffy pink memory foam slippers that were currently slapping against the concrete sidewalk with a frantic thwack, thwack, thwack. Despite the domestic attire, she had still managed to don her oversized, white plastic visor and her mirrored, polarized Oakley sunglasses. In her right hand, held high like a tactical sidearm, was the aluminum clipboard. "Stop! Stop this immediately!" she shrieked, her voice cracking through the roar of the diesel engines. She breached the perimeter line, dodging Hector's high-visibility cones like an Olympic hurdler. She marched straight toward the utility truck, her bathrobe waving in the exhaust stream. "Turn these machines off this instant!" she yelled at Jimmy, who completely ignored her and kept pushing the black resin cart through the letter E. "I am the president of the Homeowners Association. This is an unauthorized, illegal operation. You are trespassing on private property." Big Mike slowly walked out from behind the preheater truck, dusting donut crumbs off his neon vest. He loomed over her like a redwood tree next to a decorative shrub. "Ma'am, I suggest you step back behind those orange cones," Mike said, his voice flat and heavy. "This machinery operates at 400 degrees. If that hose ruptures, you're going to have a lot more to worry about than your property values." "I don't care about your hoses," Brenda screamed, her face turning a shade of purple that matched the flowers on her bathrobe. She turned her head, her mirrored visor locking onto me where I stood on my driveway. "Mark, I knew it. I knew this was your doing." "Morning, Brenda," I called out, taking a calm sip of coffee. "Love the rollers. Very retro. You think this is funny?" She stomped her foot, marching toward my driveway line. "This is vandalism. This is a criminal act. Look at the street. What have you done to the street?" "I'm just participating in civic safety, Brenda. The neighborhood has a speeding problem, remember? People flying down the road, endangering the visual harmony of the community. You painted a giant. What even is that?" She pointed a trembling, manicured finger at the 20-foot-wide WEL currently drying on the asphalt. "It's a welcome mat, Brenda," I explained slowly. "You told me on Tuesday that you wouldn't tolerate an unauthorized vertical sign on my property. So, being a cooperative, rule-abiding resident, I took it down. And then I went horizontal. This is a flat, horizontal surface treatment. It's in the middle of the street. It's an eyesore. It's a direct violation of Section 8. She slapped her aluminum clipboard with her pen. "I am assessing an immediate emergency fine of $10,000 against your lot. And I am calling the police to have all of you thrown in jail." "Go right ahead, Brenda," I smiled, leaning against my stucco pillar. "The phone's in your hand." "Oh, I am." She pulled out her iPhone with a dramatic flourish. "I am calling them right now. Let's see how smart you look in handcuffs." Brenda didn't just call the police. She dialed 911 and reported a riotous group of hostile individuals destroying public infrastructure with heavy machinery. Because of her theatrical phrasing, the Scottsdale Police Department responded with appropriate urgency. Within less than 6 minutes, the distant wail of sirens echoed through the quiet streets of Cactus Blossom Estates. Hector and the crew didn't even look up. They finished the letter E, moved to the M, and began laying down the reflective glass bead saturation over the dried sections. They were professionals. They knew the clock was ticking. 2 marked Scottsdale police cruisers rounded the corner, their blue and red LED strobe lights flashing brilliantly against the beige stucco facades of the neighborhood. They pulled up sharply, tires chirping against the asphalt, positioning their vehicles right behind Big Mike's flatbed truck. The doors flew open. 2 officers stepped out, hands instinctively resting on their utility belts. Leading the approach was Officer Jenkins, a veteran cop with a no-nonsense expression and a mustache that looked like it had seen every flavor of suburban insanity the city had to offer. "All right, what's going on here?" Officer Jenkins barked, walking past the traffic cones. "Turn the engines down. Let's get some quiet out here." Mike nodded to his driver, who cut the RPMs on the preheater truck, bringing the deafening roar down to a low, mechanical hum. Brenda didn't wait for the officers to reach the driveway. She launched herself forward, her floral bathrobe flapping wildly, her pink slippers kicking up gravel. "Officer, thank God you're here," she gasped, pointing aggressively at me and then at Mike's crew. "Arrest them! Arrest all of them immediately, especially him." She pointed her clipboard right at my face. "He is the mastermind behind this. They are defacing the neighborhood. They've ruined the road. It's criminal mischief. It's a felony." Officer Jenkins looked at Brenda. He took in the pink sleeping rollers, the fuzzy bathrobe, the mirrored Oakleys, and the frantic hand gestures. Then he looked past her at the street. The letter stencils had just been pulled up. Written across the entire width of the asphalt, in immaculate high-contrast, reflective highway text, were the words. Jenkins stared at the massive pavement mural. He blinked. He rubbed his eyes. He looked at his partner, a younger officer who was visibly struggling to suppress a massive grin. "Ma'am," Officer Jenkins said slowly, turning back to Brenda. "Take a deep breath. Who owns this property?" "I am the president of the Homeowners Association," Brenda yelled, her voice echoing down the street. "The association regulates this entire community. This road is our neighborhood corridor. They have no right to paint things on it. Look at it. It's a giant doormat. It's completely illegal." Jenkins adjusted his duty belt and walked over toward my driveway where I was standing calmly with my coffee. Big Mike stepped up beside me, looking like an impenetrable wall of high-visibility mesh. "All right, folks," Jenkins said, pulling out a small notepad. "Who's the foreman here, and who's the homeowner?" "I'm the homeowner, officer," I said, stepping forward. "Mark Evans, Lot 142. "And I'm the contractor," Mike rumbled, tapping his company logo on his chest. Big Mike's line striping. "We're an approved municipal infrastructure vendor with the state." Jenkins looked at me, his eyes narrowing slightly. "Mr. Evans, your neighbor here says you're defacing the road. You want to tell me what's going on before I have to call the city code enforcement unit out here at 6 in the morning? This is the moment, guys. This is the exact moment where the difference between a criminal and a sovereign master of malicious compliance is revealed." Brenda was smirking behind her mirrored sunglasses. Her clipboard crossed over her chest like a shield of absolute authority. She genuinely believed that the presence of blue lights meant she had won the day. "Officer," I said smoothly, reaching into my front shirt pocket, "I am a law-abiding citizen, and I take civic safety very seriously. I would never dream of modifying a public surface without the proper authorization." I pulled out the crisp, heavy stock, completely laminated document and handed it directly to Officer Jenkins. "What's this?" Jenkins muttered, taking the paper. "That," I said, pointing to the official stamp at the top, "is an approved, active, and fully executed municipal right-of-way permit number 884's TC Art, issued by the City of Scottsdale Department of Transportation and Public Infrastructure." Brenda's smirk froze. Her visor tilted down toward the paper in Jenkins' hands. "What? That's impossible. He's lying. It's a forgery." Jenkins ignored her. He held the document up to the morning light, running his thumb over the lamination. He read it line by line. His eyes moved down to the specific municipal code section. City of Scottsdale, Public Works Excerpt Permit Type. Revocable right-of-way encroachment, pavement art. Ordinance reference, Scottsdale Municipal Code Sec. 42-218 authorization. Permittee is granted exclusive access to install high-visibility traffic pavement markings to reduce neighborhood transit velocities. Jurisdictional note, public highway asset. Local private covenants, HOA, maintain zero regulatory standing within municipal right-of-way. "Well, I'll be damned," Jenkins whispered under his breath. He looked up from the paper, staring at the giant welcome mat, then looked back at the document. "This is signed by Gary Jensen, the Director of Public Infrastructure. It's got the city seal." "Of course it does," I said, taking a sip of coffee. Under Scottsdale City Ordinance, Section 42, Section 218, residents are encouraged to install neighborhood traffic calming artwork to mitigate speeding without the need for concrete humps. As you can see from the layout, the color selection and text strings comply fully with the high-contrast safety parameters outlined in the municipal code. Brenda lunged forward, trying to grab the paper from Jenkins' hand. "Let me see that. That's ridiculous. The city can't give him permission to do this. This is an HOA community. We have covenants. We have visual harmony rules." Jenkins stepped back, keeping the document out of her reach. His tone shifted instantly from investigative to thoroughly exhausted. "Ma'am, step back," Jenkins ordered, his voice dropping into that stern, authoritative register that cops use when they are completely done with suburban drama. "I don't care about your covenants. This isn't your property." "What do you mean it's not my property?" "I am the president. I don't care if you're the Queen of England, ma'am," Jenkins interrupted, pointing a sturdy finger at the asphalt. "According to this document, and according to city records, this road was deeded over to the City of Scottsdale in 2012. It is a public municipal right-of-way. The city owns the asphalt from curb to curb. The HOA has exactly 0% legal ownership of this street." Brenda gasped, her hand flying to the throat of her floral bathrobe as if she had just been physically struck. That can't be true. We manage the sidewalks. We manage the trees." "You have an easement for landscaping, ma'am," Jenkins countered, handing the laminated permit back to me with a faint, respectful nod. But you don't own the road. This man has a valid, legal municipal permit to install a traffic control device. He's within the authorized hours, he's using an approved state vendor, and he's operating under city guidelines. But look at it, Brenda shrieked, her voice reaching a pitch that could break crystal. It says, "Welcome to my house," in 10-foot letters. It looks like a giant doormat. You have to make them scrape it off. Officer Jenkins looked at the massive, pristine pavement art, then looked down at Brenda's pink memory foam slippers, which were currently resting exactly 2 inches away from the sticky, wet edge of the black resin border. "Ma'am," Jenkins said, shaking his head, "the city says it's a traffic calming device. If the city says a giant welcome mat slows down speeders, then, as far as the Scottsdale Police Department is concerned, it's a traffic calming device. There is no criminal activity occurring here. This is a civil municipal matter." He turned back to his partner. "Let's go, Miller. We're done here." "Wait, you can't leave," Brenda cried out, chasing after Jenkins as he walked back to his cruiser. "What about my $10,000 fine? What about the visual harmony?" Jenkins opened his cruiser door, stopped, and looked back at her over his shoulder. "Ma'am, if your HOA touches that city-approved pavement installation or tries to paint over it, you will be intentionally defacing municipal traffic infrastructure. That's a Class 1 misdemeanor under Arizona Revised Statutes Section 20-8721. We will come back out here and we will write you a criminal citation. Have a good morning." The door slammed shut. The engine turned over, and the 2 police cruisers slowly backed down the street, their blue and red lights turning off, leaving Brenda standing alone in the middle of the road. I raised my coffee mug toward her. "Have a blessed day, Brenda."